Welcome back, One Piece pirates, gamers, friends, amigos. As we've got another red deck profile. Man, I really do be playing a lot of red. And it's really hard not to, I'm gonna be honest with you. As enjoyer of the show, the Straw Hat crew being majority red color, if not only in the red color, makes it difficult for me not to play some of these cards. I've done a lot of Zoro so far, but I kind of wanted to give you guys my take on Luffy. I don't think Luffy is necessarily worse of the two. They're very similar in my opinion in terms of their power levels, and it comes down to player preferences and what you really want to do with the deck. I think Zoro is a really good deck at hitting you for 5, 6s as much as it wants to, where Luffy doesn't do that as much, but gains the added bonus of swinging at you for 9s, 10s, and 11s, which, depending on what your meta is at your local shop, might be better. So I wanted to show you guys my take on Luffy. It's also important to note that on last week we had a 50-man local at Pro Play Games. First place was Monkey D. Luffy. It was actually my buddy Camillo that was piloting the deck. Right before the tournament, he came to me, he saw that I was playing Luffy. He's like, brother, give me the sauce. And I gave him the deck list. We both played. I ended up in top 8. It was weird pairings, but I ended anywhere between 3rd to 6th place, depending on the way that the pairings rolled out. So definitely a lot of success with the Monkey D. Luffy. My matchups were all spread into purple, blue, red, green, law, anything green, anything you can think of. So the deck can handle most decks, and I built it in a way more often than not to deal with like a mid-range of decks. But there are definitely inclusions that you can make in this deck to make it better depending on what you see more at your local shop. But without further ado, let's get right into the deck profile. I'm going to move him right over here. Nice, that fits kind of perfectly, eh? And I'm going to start off with what I think are like more core cards in the red deck. And starting off with one of my favorite core cards, we have Chopper. Now, I have a lot of people come up to me and tell me, hey, Yadam, I have removed Chopper from my deck. This card gets blown up by everything. Nico, Robin, Okiku, it just doesn't do enough. And I'm like, brother, there is no way that I'm not playing a 1-drop blocker in my deck because I don't have to run it out on 1. I can just sit back. More often than not, the way that this card I think should be played, maybe not should, but it really feels painful, like it really just, ends up the game, is when you have a board state that you answer their board, you present a board, and then you've been holding these guys for a couple turns and you go to Chopper's Pass. At that point, it forces the opponent to have multiple outs for blockers, have spells, or just not be able to deal with the board at all. Most cases, this guy is blocking a 2k overpower, so it's already kind of like a 2k counter. Sometimes he's an 3k counter. There's no way that these cards are just not playable in the deck and fittable. They're searchable, they're recyclable. I just don't see it. I understand people's frustrations. If you get Nico Robin on curve and you're playing a deck that, you just open blockers, my apologies. But sometimes it is what it is. That just because we have that statistical variance where they didn't show up in maybe 1 or 2 games does not mean that over the course of 1,000 games, they wouldn't be good enough. And I'm gonna err to statistics this time and see how it's been improved by most of the people that I've played with and see their opinions and how their games have gone. And most of the time, more often than not, the 1-drop blockers, there's just no way that they're just not good. And then for one of the best cards in the game, our value center, our searcher, our starter, our everything, we've got 4 of the Nami. Now, Nami, there's just nothing that needs to be said about this card. I will in the future do a deep dive on how to play red, what to look for, what to mulligan, what to search off your Namis and stuff like that. But for right now, the most important thing that you need to know is that Nami can basically filter your entire deck. If you make your deck all of Straw Hats, be kind of just whatever you need is the best toolbox. She is a 1-drop, recyclable, amazing. The only negative downside to this Nami is the fact that if you are playing this Nami from the starter deck, which I believe is also a very, very strong card, you cannot search it. Since Nami has Nami in the name, and Nami cannot add Nami, bada bing, bada boom. So if you want it, that's why I'm playing 4 of this card, by the way, just so that if in this scenario where I bottom deck, I do have access to it. It is a 1k counter at the worst. The other thing you can argue is that you can, cut this down for maybe 2, meet me in 2 years to potentially look for that. But meet me in 2 years will then bottom deck events. Although I'm not playing a lot of events, there is something to be said about potentially upgrading this deck by playing maybe a couple of the meet me in 2 years just to increase the accessibility from this Nami. And then for our last card, Oh no, just kidding. Our second to last card, we have 4 of Nico Robin. This card is an absolute monster. Monster, monster, monster. If you pair this up with any sort of power reduction, and even without power reduction, the fact that this allows you to push through these guys specifically makes her really, really good, in my opinion. Because not only can she threaten things that go sideways, she can threaten things that are also not rested, and that makes her double threat. Almost often, more often than not, I've heard people say, I'm cutting Nico Robin from my deck because they always have the pistol for it. Man, if they always got the pistol for it, that means that it's a card that requires it to be pistoled, and you're not pistoling the 5-drop Luffy or things like that. So Nico Robin is a very, very good card in the mirror. In almost any matchup, it is insane. There's nothing else that needs to be said. And then I tried out playing a 2 of Brook. Now, I mostly went for the Law as opposed to this Brook. But once again, since I'm trying Luffy out, I was trying to play cards that could use the 1 Dawn on when attacking effects more than the Law. Although the Law is happening on play, this does trigger on 2 separate people. It has a 5k stat line. If I combo with my leader, it kind of has a good synergy as opposed to the Trafalgar Law. It is searchable, but I decided to put the Brook this time, and I can promise you that I never summoned him throughout the entire tournament through the 6 rounds. If I ever summoned this guy, the game was already over. He felt very unnecessary. This is a spot that unfortunately could have been Trafalgar Law, but the fact that I do bottom deck him, and if I were to play the 2 years, make Law a slightly bit worse, kind of succeeds in the argument stating that Brook was probably a better choice. Just by the fact that I didn't play him doesn't mean that he's a bad card. It just means that I can't give you the full extent of how he felt throughout the tournament. But in my opinion, red in general, this is something similar to what its core looks like. If you want to think about any red core, it looks like it's anything like this. You can also probably cut this down and play a 2 years. And this is probably like a really standard value engine for red, in my opinion. And then moving on from the value engine, let's go ahead and show you guys the 2k counter lineup. Because what I've decided, and I think is probably the best way to play red, is by playing a really, really big 2k counter lineup. Because if you can defend your top end, these greedy cards that I'm going to show you, then you can go ahead and just win most of your games. So I'm going to show the first tech. If you saw my YouTube short, Usopp. Yes, I'm sick and tired of these blue and purple decks, man. And Usopp really gets the job done. It is a card that needs to be answered. And in turns where I'm going to push for them, I can just play the Usopp, especially a Monkey D. Luffy, play this down, use his effect to put the Dawn under it, and then turn my cards sideways and watch me draw cards slowly over the course of a couple turns. As long as my leader can push these big numbers out, 9s, 12s, and they're going to have to use spells to combo, Usopp will keep advantage, and I can keep cards unrested and ready as more ammo to do on the following turn. So not only do they have to out him, they have to out my other cards, and it kind of puts them in a really sticky situation. It is searchable. It is a 2k counter. The only reason I'm playing 2 is because, once again, he only comes up in very specific matchups. The blue one, which arguably is a tough matchup, but is very, very winnable even without Usopp. Purple, which again is a good matchup, but specifically for the blue-purple Kaido and the blue-purple Crocodile's card does a lot of work. Unfortunately, since we don't have side deck, this is like the 4th time I've said that in a video, we have to do with what we got, and we have to add them to our main deck, and Usopp is just one of those cards that adds a little out to our deck. So I really like him. I think he's a staple 2k counter into the deck. And then off to the best 2k counters. No argument here. I don't think anyone would rather argue with me that Otama is not one of the best cards in the game. The only thing that keeps this card from being an absolute powerhouse is the fact that she is Wano country as opposed to Straw Hat, which is fair. 1, because she's not a Straw Hat, and 2, because if she was a Straw Hat that is searchable with this effect and this stat line, it would be really, really bananas. But even without that being super duper bananas, Otama really gets the job done. She can be used offensively, defensively, a great counter lineup. Of course, she's a 0 because this card never is turning sideways, but it does everything you want it to, even with that 0 attack line in an aggressive deck, which to me is absolutely crazy. So we play 4 of the Otamas, 4 Sanjis, and now you're going to sit here and tell me, whoa, 4 Sanjis. You're going to argue that he's one of the best 2Ks in the game, and I'm going to tell you, yes, I do think Sanji is one of the best 2Ks in the game, because against these players, if you notice, they do not hit your face. They go for board control. You need a card that lets you keep hand advantage with them. These are 2 hand advantage cards that I wanted to add into my engine. They do separate things, but Sanji is kind of crazy against control because he just stands there. And you know that on one turn, he's going to draw me a card and hit you for 8. that is a big reach for a 2K counter for a defensive card. You know what I mean? Not only is he searchable because he's a Straw Hat, he is offensive, he is defensive, he is draw power. One of the best 2Ks in the game. I'm not sure if I would venture to say he's better than Otama, but he's very, very close. Very solid card. I very much undervalued him when I first started the game because taking a life feels very risky, but you don't need to take a life in most matchups. In the matchups that you do need to take a life, he allows that to happen. So if you can see, my deck is more teched against control decks because I feel like I personally know how to handle aggro very well. I know how to play the matchup very well, so I don't tech heavily into it. But if you are struggling with aggro, I will give you those options towards the end of the video. And for our last 2K, I play 4 of Gordon. If you've looked at all my profiles, you're going to think to yourself, why is this man playing 4 Gordon? And that's because I play a lot of 4-ofs. Cards that are excessive and unnecessary. Sometimes when this Brook doesn't come up in my game, I could bottom deck this, and this could become anything, even a boat. So usually I do bottom deck. This can add me another searcher. It can curate my hand to cards that are not doing anything now, but could do something in the future, extend me into further cards. This can draw me into a Nami, a Rusher, you name it. And oftentimes that's what I use Gordon for. He does have a 3K stat line, which also isn't terrible. Using Monkey D. Luffy's effect, he's already at 4. Just have to invest 1 more Don to make him a 5, which is pretty solid for Gordon. You can argue that this could be a spot for Brook. Brook eventually just didn't make the cut here, because again, Brook is an offensive card. It does have the 2-3 stat line 2K, but Brook says put 2 Rested Dawn on a character, basically paying for himself, making him a free offensive card. The reason I didn't play him in Monkey D. Luffy is because we already have that effect in terms of Luffy and Nami, that it just seemed a little unnecessary to go into that. And since I'm playing so many 4-ofs in terms of the Brook, these Namis, jet pistols, sometimes you just don't need as many of those cards, and Gordon is able to make me allow me to play these cards that I might need in a matchup, while also, if I don't need it, recycle it into a mystery card that may be useful for later. So I do enjoy Gordon for that reason, and that's why you do see him in my deck lists. But basically that right here, these 10 2Ks that you see right here are the 2Ks that I would argue are necessary in almost every red deck. Again, this would be my idea of a core 2K sample. I think you do need 4 more. What you choose to have that be, whether it be Gordon or Brook, is completely up to you. But these are definitely staples, and you should think of including those into your deck. Moving on to our spell lineup. We have a very simple spell lineup. 4 pistol. 4 pistol, baby. It is almost always the right card to draw off of Nami. It is tempo. It is aggression. It lets you out kid. It lets you out threats like Okiku, as Laws, and Nico Robbins. This card is one of the cards that makes red so good. Many decks don't have the availability to from hand destroy a character, bounce a character, to deal with a character, but red has it in a very good card that can even trigger from life, which makes you almost like have to think about it as you do your big attack turns. You have to kind of keep cognizant that this card could be in life, so you have to move your Dawn early, move your Dawn correctly. This card can catch you at any point in the game. I was playing it at 3 because I didn't want to clog on it, but the fact that I play Gordon, again, allows me to play 4, which increases my probability of hitting it in life, while also making sure that I don't have too much of this in hand. The fact that Nami can search it is absolutely banana. But once again, if I wanted to add any more spells, I don't play round table, but once again, that's because I don't see a lot of green. If I do think there's going to be a lot of green in the tournament, round table is almost certainly a must, unfortunately. But it feels weird to include a card that is not Straw Hat, not searchable, 1-of. It's big tough. Maybe we don't play that guy and play more Trafalgar Laws to kind of increase the probability of us having an Otama plus a pistol. We have to have some sort of answer to it. Although the deck already has one, it just didn't feel like it was enough answers to consistently get it on the turn that they have the kid. There's also something to be said, again, that I said meet me in 2 years, swapping some Namis for meet me in 2 years as searchable cards, just to add more events that let me dig deeper into my deck and increase the consistency of it. I don't see anything wrong with that. I also don't seem to be playing any counter cards. You can argue, again, Guard Point, Radical Beam, these specific cards, or Red Hawk. Now, Red Hawk. Let me take a little moment here to explain Red Hawk and why I think the card is either bad or really good. Reasons why it's bad. You got to keep 2 Dawn up. Keeping 2 Dawn up in a deck like this, very difficult. You want to use your Dawn to its maximum potential Holding 2 back for defense is really, really tough. And that's why these 2K counters are so important, as they let you not hold back any power and just keep these in hand. But the reason I think Red Hawk also is very, very good is because no matter what, you can always play around it. There's no way my Nico Robin, any of my attackers, that card is never hitting him. But what it will hit is the value engines. It will hit the Bonnies. It will hit the Namis, both of these. And it will specifically hit the Choppers. These cards, maybe not this Nami. You can maybe argue that in Zoro, you can make sure that she's above 6K, but like that's really cope. An unnecessary use of Dawn. But these two for sure are always getting hit by Red Hawk. Sorry, above 4K. Always playing above Red Hawk. So it's not bad. It's easy to bluff. It's something that you can choose to bluff your opponent even if you don't play Red Hawk in your deck by just keeping 2 up on these critical turns. There are many, many times where you can see red players just float 4 or 5 Dawn. Floating 4 or 5 Dawn seems incorrect, but if you want to float a scary amount of Dawn, 2, 3, you know, keep up a Radical Beam, a Guard Point, and a Hawk. And that makes your opponent play a little bit difficult. I mean, a little bit differently. So the reason why Hawk, I would argue, is really good is because it hits cards like Jewelry Bonnie, Momonosuke, Chopper, and Suction Nami, I think is what I'm going to call her. It hits all of these really value-centric cards. And if you're playing against a lot of red decks, a lot of laws, it does merit maybe a 2 of. It's just so, the deck is so tight as it is because I'm such a greedy boy, and I'm going to explain to you why I'm such a greedy boy, that I could not fit it into my deck. But there is something to be said about playing it once again. Side deck, side deck, side deck, Bandai when. So for the greed portion of the deck, or the bullets, however you want to think about it, I've got 4 Zoro. This is the first card that I would possibly consider cutting from my deck, if I'm being honest with you. This could be starter deck Zoro. This could be legitimately anything else. It can be events. It could be whatever you want it to be. Because I did play, and you're going to see a very hefty greed engine in this deck. It could be Uda's. Uda's just not as good in Monkey D. Luffy. But it could be anything along those lines. I do think that this card is not a bad card by any means. But he most often in times he's just a removal piece. I use this card as a 5k to kill a 5k, usually a 6k to kill a 5k or a 4k, and then I can defend it with my plethora of 2ks, and then I can turn it up sideways and then go again. It just feels really crappy to draw this card off of your life in terms that where you needed combo power. He doesn't do enough in terms of his like board control. He's a little bit difficult to defend because 5k, although it's a real number, it's also not a real number because your leader can always check it. And if you've noticed, my deck lacks in the 1k department. So because of that, I did not think I needed 4 Zoros. But come on, man, am I not going to play 4 Zoros? The answer is I chose to play 4 Zoros, but I felt like it wasn't correct. And the reason why it wasn't correct is because we're following that up with literally every god card in the game. And why is every god card a Monkey D. Luffy, huh? One of the best cards in the game. No questions asked. This card is insane. Crazy, 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 crazy strong. If there was any cards that are like to be unlooked into the ban list besides Eustace, Captain Kid, and a couple other culprits, this Monkey D. Luffy. Becoming an unblockable from hand. Its stat line is crazy. If this card comes out on the board at 5, it's a 6-on-5, which is really, really hard to out. You can very easily defend it. You can keep just making sure that this card is alive. You can run it for 5 past turn and then use it on the following turn to give it as much on as you want to make sure it kills anything. This card is wild. It is abused by any color. Any deck that can touch the red color will abuse this card to some extent. And it's understandable because it's just absolutely so powerful. I don't think there's anything else that needs to be said about this specific card. And then we've got maybe a little too much of this guy, but darn it if he's not a cool card. I played 4 of the promo Luffy. Now, 4 promo Luffy, you're going to think to me, my goodness, that guy's big. And yeah, he certainly is. It's really cool if you can curve this out on evens. It's really nice to play it on 6. If you have a Nami on board plus leader effect, he can rush on that same turn, and that feels really, really powerful. Playing multiples of these in one game feels insane. And at the same time, with that 7k stat line, once he becomes unrested or untapped, he doesn't really require Dawn any much more throughout the game. You don't really, he hasn't asked for the Dawn such as cards like this or 4Ks that require Dawn to become effective. At 7K, he is a real number, and he can easily go up higher than that. On the turn that he is summoned, if you rush him, he's a 9K, which is like event plus card. You can make him a 10, which is event plus 2K. This card allows you to get into really weird number territories, very easily defended, searchable. My goodness, the games that I saw this card easily win. Like, I easily won those games. Games that I didn't see this card made the game a little harder. If I didn't see any combination of these guys, I started having a little bit of a struggle. But once again, by adding 2 years and things like that, we can again improve upon the deck and make it much stronger. And for my last 2 top end, I decided to go with Doble Shanks. I've just been so impressed by this card that I was like, man, there's no way I'm not playing 2. But, as it feels like there's a lot of buts in this video, because although I did play this deck and it did end up technically getting first place in a 50-man tournament and third place in the 50-man tournament with the exact same list, there are still improvements. We can still improve and make the deck better against a wider board state. And even though Shanks was really good, if I can defend this 7, I can easily defend this guy. The problem with Shanks, though, is that it telegraphs an entire turn. If I don't have my Nami on the board, my suction Nami, it makes life a little bit more difficult because I want to pump him up to crazy numbers. And it just, the fact that he's not searchable, even if I played the 2 years or by the Namis, he ended up getting bottom decked a lot, and that's why I wanted to play him at 2. Fortunately enough, Gordon again allows me to play out of these bricks. In the games that I don't need Shanks, Gordon can bottom deck him. And there's a lot of cards that feel just right. Like, I have my outs to my own deck, but I shouldn't have the need to have outs to my deck. My deck should just flow and be this beautiful, silky, milkshakey deck. I don't know. Really don't know where I was going with that. But the 2 Shanks may have been a little much. The 4 of the 6 drop may have been a little much. But these are like easy removals. We can also start cutting Zoros and just play more value-centric cards. It looks more like a Christmas tree now, which is very holiday appropriate. But I did like him at 2. The games that I saw him, again, easy wins. I just want to see some amount of these cards. Not the Zoro as much, but some amount of these here, and it feels really solid. Seeing less amounts means a very bad time because I'm basically playing with my 2Ks and not really pushing forward. So that is the deck list. I will have the entire list on the description. Again, shout out to Camillo for getting first place. God bless, buddy. Did a really good job that day. And I will, in the description below, not upload this one, but my improved version of this deck. This is something that we came up with legitimately a couple minutes right before the tournament. We thought, why can't Luffy be good, man? Red is just so powerful that we can make this good. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys have a nice little deck profile of one of the starter decks. And as always, keep on gaming and find that one piece. Yes?